coming in peace. Thank you for
community. Largely in response to the civil rights movement, the Black consciousness movement, the effort to put our history in its proper place. Museums emerged to do that, but they emerged in the heart of the African American community. We moved into this community in 1988, and we moved here deliberately so. Conventional wisdom all over this nation is that you hide your poverty areas, and once you succeed in hiding them, then you can succeed in neglecting them. But that we were going to create a museum right in the challenged community that would show that cultural tourism can be a catalyst for jobs and opportunity and for legacy. We tell 5,000 years of history here. So we go from slave ship to spaceship with people that you would expect, like a Harriet Tubman or a Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King and so forth, but little known figures as well. Our ancestors would want us to know we didn't die by the millions for you to kill one another by the thousands. So those messages that we send to our young of respecting life, respecting one another, respecting history, and respecting human beings and humankind. People learn that we don't have to run away from very difficult topics.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Haney. Welcome to 60 Minutes in Black America. It's good to be here. Hope you all are having a great week. I am so excited at the guest that we have today. Wonderful human being, and what a profound statement that in that clip that we played. You know, we did not die to see each other die by the thousands, for our freedom. But I'm looking forward to this conversation with Dr. Joanne Martin, co-founder of the first museum dedicated to Black wax figures in this country. So let's bring Dr. Martin in to the stream, because I know it's been very popular, a lot of great comments on the course of the past couple of days as we've begun to introduce people to her. And people were intrigued. Dr. Martin, how you doing today?
I'm fine. How are you?
It is so good to see you, Dr. Martin. You know, no doubt that you're a favorite of mine. And, I just appreciate you joining us on the show as we wrap up Black History Month. And hopefully we're in a position to begin to make some more history so that you can figure out what the next figures are for your phenomenal Blacks and Wax National Black and Wax Museum. So how does a young woman from Yulee, Florida, that's where you're from, right?
That's correct. Yulee, Florida.
Where is Yulee, Florida, Dr. Martin, and how did you transition from there to Baltimore?
Well, Yulee is 12 miles from Jacksonville. It is near, people sometimes recognize it, Amelia Island, as a location, St. Augustine, Florida. And it's on the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf Coast. So all of that is Yulee, Florida. Some people know Fernandina Beach, Florida, and American Beach, Florida. So that's Yulee.
Wow. So they did a real good job of raising you, Dr. Martin. So from Yulee, Florida, and I've got to go visit it, to Baltimore, to Africa. You've been around the world, around the country, and you have founded this phenomenal museum with a lot of stops along the way as an educator, because I believe your background is in education. Is that correct?
That's correct. And along the way, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention these HBCUs that are Howard, well, Florida A&M University, and then Atlanta University, and then Howard
Hmm.
University. Very much a product of that history. I met my husband, Elmer, at Atlanta University. So people ask
Okay.
how did a country boy from Glasgow, Missouri, and a country girl from Yulee, Florida, end up somehow finding each other, and that was at Atlanta University.
So the middle of the country, Glasgow, Missouri, to the Panhandle of Florida, you two meet, and we're going to talk about Dr. Elmer in a bit, and in a sense, meet him and hear how you all got together. Because one thing I love about you, you have continued to acknowledge him, and I really want to learn and hear more. Because something tells me that your life work to this point is part of the passion that you two had. So, Dr. Martin, the Great Blacks in Wax Museum was started as a result of you and Dr. Martin deciding to do what? What was the purpose in the Great Blacks in Wax Museum? Why did you all start that?
I guess maybe a few motivations. One that when Elmer and I met at Atlanta University, I intended to be the UN interpreter with
Hmm.
my degree in French, and felt that I would never learn French if I didn't immerse myself by going to France. And
Hmm.
Elmer interfered with that because we met, and there went my career path. But he promised me that we would go to France, and he lived up to that promise. And it was in France that we began to articulate for to ourselves that perhaps what people see as French arrogance, people from the United States, that perhaps it's just having a sense of your place in history and acknowledging and owning and feeling that you deserve that place, and that was something
Wow.
that African Americans and people of African descent had been denied and robbed of. Um,
Wow.
and so it was looking at how do you give Black people, people of African descent, that sense of your place in history. And started looking around. We wrote 4 books on the Black family, the Black community, the helping tradition in the Black family and community, all of those things. But that was not the audience we sought to reach.
Right.
We, being from Yulee, Elmer's grandmother was visiting us from Missouri. We took her to Potter's Wax Museum in St. Augustine, just as a way of entertaining her. Elmer and I loved the whole concept of a wax museum. His grandmother was bored and wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. But that was a life changing moment for us, and we didn't recognize. But Elmer spent one day in the Library of Congress looking for whether or not there was a Black History Wax Museum anywhere in the United States. He concluded and found no evidence that there was, and said that if there wasn't one at that time in the U.S., then there was likely not to be one anyplace. And so that was sort of the beginning, along with looking at what was going on with our youth, and the rejection of um, learning Black history and culture and all of those things, and wanting to get back to and find how we had gotten so far away from this zeal
Wow.
that we brought from the 60s and the civil rights movement and so forth, of embracing our history and our Blackness. We were Black, declared ourselves Black and not Negro in color. That was
Wow.
that
Yes.
was the characteristic of our generation. We were declaring that, as James Brown said, "Say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud, and Black is beautiful, and Black is not a color but a state of mind," all of those things, and trying to find a way to embrace that. Elmer said we failed to institutionalize our history, to
Wow.
build
That's
institutions.
powerful. That is powerful. Dr. Martin, if you don't mind, I like to bring Dr. Elmer in. You know, I found some stuff on him as I went digging for him, and I'd like to play for the viewers Dr. Martin's thoughts about
Okay.
why he started the museum. Would you mind that?
Oh, not at
Let me
all.
play something. Just a minute. Let me play something that
Okay,
Dr.
great.
Martin said about. Give me 1 second.
Popularizing Black history had been with us for a number of years. I think one of the things that motivated us was the fact that the 60s and the Black consciousness mood seemed to be dying out in the late 70s and in the 80s, particularly among young people and college age students. So the thought of creating a mechanism whereby Black history would be popularized, taken out of the school systems and put into the homes and into the streets. That thought had been with us for a number of years.
So, Dr. Martin, Dr. Elmer Martin's voice, right? What
Yeah.
did you feel? What did you feel?
It's been a long time since I've heard that voice. Um, his words, he continues to shape so much of what I do, but what the museum does. I tell people that when they're walking around in the museum, it's like walking around in the head of Dr. Elmer Martin. Because he was a true visionary, so far ahead of his time. And the idea that our history would be message oriented. So the statement that our ancestors, the message from the ancestors, we didn't die by the millions for you to kill one another by the thousands, to our youth as we try to get them to embrace life and respect one another. His notion that the exhibits should honor the ancestors. So he said that if we're not going to do justice to the slave ship experience, that that's a story that we should not try to tell. Particularly with lynching, he said that museums, especially mainstream museums, they'll do a temporary exhibit on lynching, pat themselves on the back, get a lot of media attention, and then move on. And or they'll fill it with so much symbolism that you don't know the heinousness of lynching. And if we weren't going to do honor to that story, then don't tell that story. And so much of what drives the museum is Dr. Elmer Martin, and so hearing his voice, he's always the whisperer for us at the museum, and we feel bossing us around, continuing to do that, but being still shaping what we do and how we do it, and I'm just
Who's
so.
this picture of Dr. Martin? Who is this? Who are these two people?
Oh, I don't know those two people. They're too young. I don't recognize either one of them. But that,
Is that you and Dr. Martin? I wasn't sure, but I know that was a beautiful young lady, just as you are today, and with a wonderful, statured young man, elegant young man. Is that you and Dr. Martin?
that's him in his signature kufi and his
Wow.
African wear. Yeah,
You
that's
guys look absolutely remarkable, and the reason that I want to honor you and honor Dr. Martin, and we'll talk more about the museum, is because you know people like you, Dr. and Dr. Martin, that continue to press forward and honor our history as Black people. See, because much of our history had been written, but you made a decision with Dr. Martin to continue to honor that legacy in a particular manner that people weren't used to. And it's even popular today to the tune of 250,000 people a year come and see what you and he started. And we're going to talk about how you started that. And I read places where he mentioned having wax figures laid on the bed, and your home, and how they all came about. and taking this little bit of money to start it to see what it is today. You know, I honor you by having your dream behind me, and we'll talk about that in the second half. But, you know, people that really want to understand it just need to go and see it. Just need to go down there and see it. You know, you can see it virtually, or you can come to Baltimore, Maryland, where it is, where tens of thousands of people come a year and see what these two people have done to ensure our legacy. So, Dr. Martin, let's talk about a bit about the museum itself and some of what people would expect. Like, I know you have a lynching scene that is very controversial, a scene of a black man being lynched at the museum. Why? Why did you feel that significant to show the world?
Well, when we talk about the sacrifices that our ancestors made, when we look at our children, often can know about Rosa Parks, and for them, it's about the seat on the back of the bus, and that's the way they define struggle. And the notion that we were stolen out of the only country that we knew, from our home, our mothers, our fathers, our people, and put on slave ships, packed into slave ships. If you miss that part of the story and bring it down to a seat on the bus, you have missed why we need to continue to fight, why we need to look at voter suppression and know that this is something that we need to fight against, because people were lynched to be able to vote. If we don't tell that, then you miss what the struggle is, but how you need to be involved in assuring that we hang on to our rights, that we fight for our rights. And if you see lynching as frontier justice, then and miss the whole idea that black men in particular were lynched simply because they happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, or someone made the decision to kill them. Then you miss again what it was to struggle and to make the world better. Or when you don't understand, when our children were in the lynching exhibit, and we make that a decision that the parents make about whether or not they can see that exhibit, and many parents say, I want them to understand real violence and not the virtual violence that they get surrounded by. And one of the kids said, look at those two little girls at that hanging. Why would their mother let them be at that hanging? Um, and and so hearing our children articulate the struggle, um, and so that's what we do, and we send those messages to our young people, that we don't want them to be involved in killing, because that is dishonoring life, the life that their ancestors fought for, the life that their ancestors would want them to have, that they died for education. They want our children to live for it. All of those messages that we get a chance to tell and to feel are so important for moving forward.
You know, Dr. Omar Martin mentioned in some readings that I saw back in the 80s his discouragement at young people not being aware of knowing who Malcolm X was, or Martin Luther King in the school, as one of the instigators of him wanting to start this to ensure that our young people understood our history, right? Yeah, I read somewhere about that. And so now there's this issue with critical race theory, right? Critical race theory of teaching and educating some of the atrocities that have been against Black people. Have, are you aware of that? What do you think about teaching history of Black people in mainstream American public schools? Now, you just came off a tour, right, of taking your museum figures to certain parts of the country. And as I was looking at where they were going, that I saw a multitude of white people there as well, learning about our history. Can you talk a bit about what that does in terms of educating others outside of our community and in our community through what it is that you have developed in this wax museum? How receptive are they to that?
I was just so very honored and proud to work with the youth that I encountered in my travels recently. But going back to a story at the museum, which ties into what I found and the hunger and the willingness and the openness of our children, whoever those children are, whatever their background and race, to learn history of this United States. When we unveiled our lynching exhibit in 1997, there was a group of children from New York visiting. And the young blacks they heard me mention to a reporter that my uncle said when we asked him about whether he had a lynching story, and he said, "Oh man, to Elmer, all black people got a lynching story." And the kids said, "Well, we don't have a lynching story because we didn't know there was such a thing as lynching." And so we talked briefly about that. And then when they left out, a young Japanese American student from their group came up to me and she said, "I heard what my classmates said about not knowing about lynching. I didn't know about it either, but I have something that's a little bit more personal to me now. And that is, I just found out a few weeks ago about Japanese American internment." And she said, "And I've been in agony ever since because not my parents, not my grandparents were always talking about the Issei's and the Nisei's, not my teachers, not my textbooks had ever mentioned this part of my history to me." And so I hear my classmates talking about, my African American classmates talking about an aspect of history that they didn't know. And I know the agony that I feel about not knowing this aspect of my history. And I ask myself, who makes the decisions about what history gets told and not told? And she was in agony about this. And I told her, as when we got ourselves together, because it was a very moving moment, from here on out, we must never allow anyone to take us out of the process. And that's what happens when someone decides that that we're going to be taken out of the process, or that it's not something to be shared. Our children deserve to know the truth about this country so that they can make it better. You can't fight voter suppression if you don't understand the ways in which the vote was suppressed in the past. You
So when you
can't.
say our children, when you say our children, you're talking about children regardless of race, creed, or color. Is that what you mean?
That's what I mean.
Mhm.
That those are our children, and they deserve to know the truth. They're the ones, as I told two young students from Baltimore County, two young men. One of them, as I was presenting the information, he stopped me and said, "Why do we need to know this?" Right in mid sentence. And I said, "Because I see whites in this group and African Americans and Latinos and Hispanics, Asians, but you're the ones who are going to be the ones to lead this country. And you'll be a better leader, a better parent, a better teacher, a better sanitation worker, whatever, if you have a sense of all of the narratives that make up who we are as the United States of America." And today you get to learn about the people of African and African American descent. But that will make you a better person to be the one who's going to run this country. And so, yes, all of our children, whoever those children may be.
Well, it's interesting, Dr. Martin, because even though you honor athletes, I read somewhere where Dr. Martin and you may have made a decision to consciously not overwhelm it with athletes because athletic prowess is something we know that has always been recognized. I think that Jackie Robinson as a first and others that are in your museum is one thing, but I read a comment by Dr. Omer specifically about not overwhelming with athletic, because when you look at just like in Atlanta, right now, Reverend Warnock is in a race for the Senate against a black athlete who doesn't necessarily align with our thinking. But nor does he seem to have the background and depth to be a representative of any people, regardless of whether they're black, pink, or purple. But they're using him for his athletic prowess, which is something I think had always been of concern for us, that versus our intelligence, which you and Dr. Elmer prominently display in what you have done and erected and how you have gone about it. They look at us for our athletic prowess, whereas we're more apt to know, our kids are more apt to know of a famous black athlete, nothing against LeBron James, but do they know about Raphael Warnock? Do they know about John Lewis? Do they know about others that have died for the cause? And that's what you have attempted to expose. So when you look at your wax figures, what are some of the more popular ones to the public? What are the ones that the public seem to be drawn to?
One of the things that we wanted, the message that we wanted to send is that there are no limits to what we can do because there are no limits to what we have done. And we'd have kids to come in and they look and say they look so real and they're not reading or whatever. And what when they walk out, then they could tell you they saw an athlete. Sometimes they wouldn't even know the name of the athlete, but they saw I saw a boxer or whatever. We wanted to break that mold um, and get them to see inventors and scientists, but people who fought, or to understand again what Rosa Parks, what she did had so little to do with the back of a bus. So opening it up to the broad spectrum of our history and the ways that in which we have influenced the making and shaping of America and the world. And so when I went to Florida, the theme was the political race, and I took some of our wax figures. Um, Look at and have them to understand Thaddeus Stevens, a Republican, a white Republican who, with Charles Sumner, passed some of the first civil rights legislation in the nation.
Okay,
People
Dr.
don't
Mark, could
know
you
that.
back up for a second? You said Adelaide Stevens. You have a wax figure,
Thaddeus, no, Thaddeus Stevens,
Thaddeus
and
Stevens. Thaddeus
yes,
Stevens, who
and,
was a black Republican.
a white Republican,
Yeah, that's what I
but
thought.
yes,
So
Thaddeus.
our people need to hear that, and this was back in early century, right? A
Right.
white Republican was responsible for some of the progress that we have made as a people, right?
Yeah, right. Passing the first civil rights bills in the nation. So, people think civil rights legislation and they're looking at the 1960s. We're talking about the 1860s, right after the Civil War ended, where they helped passage of the Civil Rights Act, I think of 1866 and 1867. Um, and passage of the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, vowing to break and crush slavery. And so those are the kinds of things that we need to know. I talk to the kids about why are amendments necessary, and so they then to getting to the 14th Amendment, why you would need a 14th Amendment. But that was the amendment that declared that free blacks were citizens, that all blacks were citizens, because Roger B. Taney, Maryland's Roger B. Taney, had written a ruling that said the black man has no rights which the white man is bound to respect. And that was around the issue of whether free blacks were citizens. They might be considered free, but they were not citizens. That's what the civil right. That's what the Supreme Court ruling stated. And so you needed the 14th Amendment to make us citizens of this United States.
Wow.
Just that kind of history that doesn't get taught or understood.
Wow, and it's amazing how you do it, showing a figurine or that power of example of what young people can see, and then giving them an explanation of the history, because a lot of people are visual with that. And this is what I call outside the classroom learning. We can learn so much more coming into a museum like yours or other museums. Hey, Dr. Martin, it's amazing how fast 30 minutes goes. We're at the halfway point. I got a little bit of an infomercial I'm going to do very quickly because there's so much more we need to discuss, and time's going to go on. But you're looking at Black, 60 Minutes in Black America. My name is Mike Haney. We have Dr. Joanne Martin, as well as, I'm going to say, Dr. Martin, Dr. Elmer Martin, and his
Yes,
spirit is with us as well. So there's four of
absolutely.
us in this interview. But the Black USA Network is 7 days a week now, Monday through Friday, Black USA News with Donnie Glover, Monday through Friday at 10 o'clock, Black USA Morning Show with William Honolulu, and Monday evenings, Frontline News with Jason Rodriguez. Monday evenings at 7, Shared Spaces. Monday evenings at 8, The Robert Report. When I started this, you guys, we had like 4 or 5 shows, and now we're going to have another show on Sunday evenings following 60 Minutes in Black America with Erica Alston Buck, who many of you know. On Sundays as well, we have Politics Over People with Martin Mitchell. On Saturdays, we have Joe Noble from Miami live. Tasmir gives us the Blackout from New York at 10 o'clock or 10:15 on Saturdays as well. On Friday, my good friend Kamal Hubbard at 7 p.m. from Oakland, California with crypto news. And on Thursday, my real good friend Doug and Dr. Ashley from Oakland as well at 7 p.m. on Thursday with Black Business Roundtable. And here in the state of Maryland, Conference Room Conversations with Carla Nelson Chambers at 7 p.m. on Wednesdays. And then, the incomparable Marsha Jews on Tuesdays with We Keep It Moving, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Again, this is Mike Haney with 60 Minutes in Black America, and we're talking to Dr. Joanne Martin. And hey, let me remind you, next Sunday, 5 p.m. Central Time and 6 p.m. Eastern Time, I will be doing 60 Minutes in Black America live from the Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. I'm traveling to Selma, Alabama in memory of Bloody Sunday, which happened on March 7th, a number of years ago, but we're walking across the Pettus Bridge in memory of what happened, and we'll be televising live in Selma. And the guest that day will be Dr. Avis Williams, the superintendent of public schools down there. So we're going to have a riveting conversation. She's an exciting, wonderful person. But today we got Dr. Joanne Martin. So Dr. Martin, Dr. Elmer and you traveled quite a bit, right? You traveled around the world. You said you had gone to France and you had been to Africa, I believe, a number of times as well, right?
Yes, yes. And in fact, Elmer died in Egypt.
I was going to ask
International.
you about that, Dr. Martin. So Dr. Elmer passed away in Egypt.
Yes.
How was that coming back, Dr. Martin? Because, it's apparent for all that I learned, all that I know, how close you were, him from Missouri, you're from Florida, coming together, you guys seem like real soulmates. But coming back because if we look at what you have accomplished, and I think he passed, was it in 2000, Dr. Martin?
2001.
2001 he passed, right? From
Yes. Yes.
2001, what you have accomplished the past 1 years, phenomenal. That's why I said it's four of us in this interview, because I know he's still guiding and getting some stuff done. But what was your process and what were your thoughts after that happened to bring you where you are today? What did you decide? How were you feeling then?
Well, when Elmer died in Egypt, I think everyone who's had to experience that kind of death and someone that's close, there's this kind of numbness that sets in, but there was a clarity for me. Elmer wanted to go to Nubia, and I I did that. the part of Egypt that is recognized as African Nubia. The tour guide and I and the people the person who was with us, we toured that part of Africa. And but on the plane, I made a promise to Elmer. I'm riding on a plane where Elmer's body is beneath me in the cargo. That was the reality of flying back and dealing with that experience. And then I had to come back to Baltimore and plan a memorial service for him and all of that. And jump on a plane and fly to the NAACP convention where we were unveiling a figure and all of that coming at me. But I made a promise to Elmer that I was going to see to it that as long as I was strong enough and able enough, I was going to see that his dream for this museum was realized.
Well,
And
I
I
got to
have
tell you, Dr. Martin, you have done a tremendous, tremendous, tremendous job. And I want to acknowledge one thing. This young lady, Erica Morgan, said in the chat, Dr. Martin, I had the honor of being married at the Great Black and Wax Museum in 2000. And I'm
wow.
also a former student of the great Dr. Elmer Martin. This is emotional for me because, knowing you and understanding, this is very emotional. And so people were sending comments in the chat. India artists who I know works for the NAACP talked about the fact of Roy Wilkins and Walter White figures, which you mentioned, doing some things with the NAACP. So, obviously some memories are cropping up, but the inspiration to what it is that, as you said, you came back, the mission was clear. The mission was clear. And so let's talk about that for a minute, Dr. Martin, because one of the things where your museum is located, because you bring people in from all over the country, really all over the world, right?
Right.
And you bought up a lot of stuff up there. You bought up a lot of property in hopes of doing what up there? What is it that you try to attribute? And first of all, let's talk about the community that your museum is currently in now. What does that community look like? Is it downtown, in the inner harbor, Baltimore, in the tourist destination area? Where's your museum located?
We're right in East Baltimore in the Oliver community, the East Broadway community, and so right in the heart of the African American, a fragile community in East Baltimore, deliberately so. As I said on one of the videos that you played, Elmer's idea that conventional wisdom is that you hide your poverty areas, and once you succeed in hiding them, then you can succeed in neglecting them. And that we were going to show that we're part of a tradition. The Wright Museum in Chicago, in Detroit, or the some of those early pioneering museums located themselves right in the heart of the African American community, and we were going to be a second generation of that, but also that it was going to be through tourism, bringing a community, showing that communities can thrive through tourism, that you can build businesses and entrepreneurship. And people ask us after the Great Blacks and Wax Museum, what else is there to see? And right now, there aren't enough businesses in that area. But also taking advantage of the opportunity to work with the Terra Cafe or some of the businesses, and bringing that kind of cooperative economics through a museum, and getting the leaders of the city to understand the potential of a museum when you've got people, as you said, coming from all over the United States, all over the world, to a museum located in the heart of the African American Museum on a corner of North Avenue and Bond Street. That there was a potential that I feel is being missed. But Elmer and I, him as the whisperer, still fighting to make that happen.
Dr. Martin, I'm very much into tourism, have done a lot of work, and an entity that brings in 250,000 people a year, and I know your numbers. I know your numbers, right?
Yeah. Yes,
And that, how do you not treat an entity like that with credibility. Let's talk about the most recent economic tourism generator in our market, the city of Baltimore. And it's similar all over the country, be it Alabama, Montgomery, or Birmingham, or Detroit, or Chicago, and Black communities. The CIAA conference just held its championship here right after the pandemic. And, here we are as a people, right? The first instigator of economic engine back breathing life into a city, right?
Yeah, right.
But yet, when it comes to the equality of, say, your expansion and the capital infusion of investing in our communities, do you see there's a disparity in your access to capital to do your expansion? Because, quite frankly, if it was something else, I'm wondering whether it would have been done by now because it's such an economic catalyst.
And you're right. The idea that our communities, the when Elmer and I moved into the heart of the African American community, that became a part of what we had to struggle against. That perception. If we had gone with the effort to really force us to stay to move into the harbor, then we might not be struggling today. But we are saying, first off, don't see North Avenue as it is, but as it can be. When the buses, and you know the buses that lined up along North Avenue, we thought that that was going to be enough of an incentive for people to see that they're not at the harbor, they're here in this challenged community because Great Blacks in Wax is there. And the buses lined up along North Avenue, down the whole block. We thought that would matter. And if it were someplace else, you're right. If we weren't in the challenge community, where we're showing that tourism, that people are leaving the harbor to come to find us because Great Blacks and Wax has such a power and a draw. Um, None of that worked. None of that mattered, and that has been the frustration. But we also know that people continue to come. We're looking at pre-pandemic with some of the numbers you mentioned, but we've been very busy in February, and the bookings are increasing for March and the rest of the year. So people are coming back, and the potential to develop businesses and make it an economic opportunity for people and a cultural opportunity is just being missed in a way that has not made sense to me.
Hey, no doubt about it, Dr. Martin. We can go on and talk about us as a community, a Black community, and where our investments should be to support entities like yours so that we ensure that we have some cohesiveness and culture in our own community. So it isn't always necessary on mainstream. Sometimes we have to take projects in ourselves and figure out a
Absolutely.
way, particularly for something such as yours. But let's talk about one of your exhibits. Let's talk about one of your more recent exhibits, Obama. When did you do Obama? You have a statue of the former president or a wax figure of the former president up in your museum now currently, right?
Right. We unveiled his figure in 2009 as a part of his inauguration.
So while he was in office, you were one of the first to do one, right?
Yes, that's right. And it was the unveiling was at Morgan State University, and he was down in the orchestra pit, and they raised his figure up from the pit, and it was just an amazing event. So the auditorium was filled with people. We had people coming all week long, even really before he was elected, to and saying, this is a historic moment, whether he wins or not, and he's going to win. And people, the museum so crowded with people on the day that we unveiled his figure, and just that people would stand and take pictures. Sometimes that area would be so crowded with people who didn't want to move. It was such a moment, and it continues to be, because he has so much respect among our people and among people in this nation. So just so proud that we were able to unveil his figure at such a historic moment.
Wow. And I've got a note. There's a note here from Kathy Evans. Kat, you probably know her with the Office of Tourism. She always has comments. Now, I was waiting for one to come up here. Dr. Martin, I work in the State Office of Tourism. Local tourism officers are giving grant money to promote local attractions. Shame on them for not helping promote your museum. And group travel is a big part of the city tourism. So, as we begin to get the word out here, because, Kat is absolutely right that we have to advocate. That's why it's so important to me that you're here today, and that we continue to talk. And I know Vince Leggett, Vince Leggett, Lou Fields. There's a
Right.
multitude, and then there's other around the country. Art Black Shear in Oakland, and then we got Michael Randolph in Tampa. There's a multitude of us. But how do we, during a Black Historical Month, Black History Month per se, look for the next month, because it's over March 1st, or is it over? Or should it be just beginning relevant to what we can do actionable so that we begin to start doing history? You know what I'm saying? So we celebrate, we feel good. I go to Southwest, I see your statues or your wax figures. I'm sorry for calling them statues. See
That's
your wax
no, that's
figures.
that's fine.
No, it's not fine. It's a wax figure, man. And so I go there and see it, and then March 2nd, it probably isn't there. But where's our mentality having been reminded so that as a community and a country, we're energized, and we're also, we also agendized to make some things happen, to the point of, like Kathy mentioned, ensuring that you have promotional money, ensuring that you have money for expansion, so that these become things that are relevant to our agenda to keep things moving. And so that's just a gyration that I had, Dr. Martin. But a follow up to President Obama. Just a question for you. What do you think his legacy is? And as you did a figure of him as the first, right? Just like I'm sure Vice President Harris will get one as a first, right?
Yeah.
What was Obama, in your estimations, legacy and contribution to our history, as you talked about Thaddeus Stevenson and others that have some tangible stuff that they've done for us? What in your perspective, what did Obama do for us?
Well, I think that he and Michelle, and I think that we should not talk about him without talking about Michelle Obama,
Absolutely.
because she was such a strong voice, and a person who we need Michelle in the museum as well. Um, the two of them brought such dignity to the office. And when you look at the ways in which has been eroded, but that we can take a sense of pride that they didn't shame us as a people, because so much of what we bear is just the idea that we have to be a credit to our race, whatever that is, but to get blamed for just almost anything that goes wrong. And they maintain that sense of dignity and family and raising their children and caring about one another and respecting one another. And you saw the love and respect between those two people. So that for me is one of the things that should resonate when we talk about legacy. He's going to be remembered for things like the Affordable Care Act, but for me, just this sense of humanity and kindness, and just caring about dignity and self-worth.
Wow.
Those are the things that he should be remembered for, and his wife Michelle and their children.
Well, Dr. Martin, I absolutely agree with you, because he was a great human being, and I heard the comments that someone mentioned during the Whoopi Goldberg recent spill out with Whoopi making certain comments, and someone said something profound. I had a gentleman on my show last week, Mike Rosenbaum, the first non-African American on my show I'd ever had, because he had some profound and compelling educational initiatives geared towards Black. Matter of fact, on the lunch film tomorrow, we're talking about education. But we are all part of one race, the human race. And so, to your point, Obama not only represented us well, he represented the office well, he represented humanity well, because he was just a phenomenal human being, whether you agreed with his policies or not. And is that not how we should see ourselves as human beings? And so I say that to say, as I look at your exhibits and I look at them force feeding the slave on the ship to make sure he didn't lose weight, as I look at the exhibit, and as I mentioned to the viewers earlier, I'm not going to show you many pictures. If you didn't catch the minute and 38 clip earlier, then you need to come in town. You need to come in Baltimore. You need to go down and see what Dr. Martin and Elmer Martin have done in terms of documenting our history. But when I bring up the slave ship scene and I look at these things that have been prominent in our history, you know, that it's important for us all to understand that we are human beings. And I think that that's one thing that I look at in your museum, that you show that the lack of dignity that we were treated like, that, you know, we all need to see this. We all need to understand, you know, what it is that we were and what we are today and how we should be treated, which is as human beings. And to our people, Dr. Martin, you mentioned in the clip, and you mentioned it in comment, our people, our young people in our community, how they treat each other and kill each other. Can you expound on that? And what message do you have for our young people in our community so they can respect the legacy of their forefathers that died and went to jail for them? What message do you have for our young people?
Well, you know, I tell people that when young people come into the museum and they start crying, I don't have a problem with those tears, because those tears say to me that you have a level of compassion that says that you can look at this and feel empathy about what happened. And if you can feel that empathy, then I have a belief that you're not going to so easily go out and brandish a gun and gun someone down. And so if I can bring out and get you to recognize that level of compassion, then that's half the battle for me. And I have the kids who come in and they break into tears, and some of them come in crying and so forth. Those tears are important. And that's what Elmer spoke to. He used the ancestors, and so he would speak the voices of the past, speaking to the present and the future. And he, in the lynching exhibit, he said, "Don't feel anger, but think about what you, the living, are tasked to do in assuring that crimes like this never happen." And that there is always a respect for human dignity. That's what I want them to have and to know.
Wow. Well, you know, Dr. Martin, I want to read a couple comments in the chat, because I can't read them all, but, you know, people are listening and enjoying this conversation. Dr. Leroy McKenzie said, great information, great conversation, information. A great Blacks and Wax Museum is filled with great historical figures and information that is much needed in our community and nation. And is this our catalyst? He ain't saying this, I'm saying that. Is this our catalyst begin to change, so that out of Black History Month, March 1st, to Dr. Martin's agenda, which we're going to get a couple minutes to talk about, and making this expansion a realization? What do we have to do to have that happen? Another comment, Kat Evans, and I tell you, like I said, I was just waiting. She's covered both our faces up. This is a book, but it's important. Dr. Martin, I was at BWI Airport a couple weeks ago and noticed your wax figures of Evers Williams, and I went back to the office and mentioned what you were doing, and guess what? No one in tourism knew. So no one knew, and we have to change that dynamic as a people. And when we have these positions that we're in, that we're so proud of, right? That we are able to ensure that we look after each other, because many times we identify ourselves not by who we are, but by what we do. And at the end of the day, we're human beings and we happen to be of Black descent. And what do we do to contribute to each other's betterment? And not just Black people, but all people. So Dr. Martin, we're down to the last 5 minutes. I tell you, this conversation is gone, man. And I could probably extend it another hour, but 60 minutes in Black America, 60 minutes, they tell me I only got 60. But talk about the expansion, because as I said, it's behind me. I felt so proud of what it is that you have attempted to develop and want to achieve, that I had to put this behind me. But tell me about that expansion and what you think. You mentioned earlier about it being a catalyst, but let's talk about the money, how much it costs, and what do you think that we need to do as a community to make this thing happen?
Well, we're talking about a project that is started out $76 million project, and 100 million is um, would be a drop in the bucket almost, but we'll take it. But we're talking about a block long museum where we began in 1995 to purchase the buildings in the block and the buildings behind us. We're looking at what Elmo called a mecca. People coming to North Avenue and finding 250,000 years of history, where we have a scene devoted to something like technology, science, and technology, and so forth, to have a whole gallery. We're looking at a children's gallery where the exhibits are designed to show the children can learn history, but at their level. We're looking at being able to partner with businesses so that the tourism that we're bringing into and showing can exist in our community, that there are business opportunities, that if you have wares to sell, if your artistry and so forth, that you can take advantage of the tourists who are there and the market that we are creating because we are there. And that's what cooperative economics is supposed to do. But we're also looking at people in learning history in its totality. And as I talked about a Thaddeus Stevens and a Charles Sumner, Charles Sumner was beaten to the floor of the Senate by a Dixiecrat,
Mm.
because he embraced the end of slavery and fighting for the rights of the newly freed people. Um, just and tying and understanding the ways in which all of those things represent where we are now. There is just so much to learn and to know about what the struggle has been for all of us in fighting for justice, and the ways in which we need to continue to do so in this block long mecca of a museum.
Wow. Dr. Martin, that's powerful. And we're down to the last minute and a half. Dr. Martin, has been phenomenal having you on the show. Matter of fact, it's emotional for me. And just in terms of not only having known you for a number of years, but just studying and understanding Dr. Elmer and knowing that he's here with us, because I feel him in the presence, and that, I've got work to do off of this in terms of helping to promote something that's important, because it's a different way to educate our young people. And like you said, our children, regardless of color, regardless of creed, we all need to understand and know each other's history. So Dr. Martin, last 20 seconds, what is your prayer for the world, for the people of the world, as we have come out of this pandemic, seeing what we've seen with Trayvon Martin, actually George Floyd, Trayvon Martin, I think it's his anniversary today, 10 years ago from when he was killed. But what is your prayer for our world, in 10, 20 seconds? What do you hope for our world to achieve?
I want them to achieve what my father understood. My father, who went to the Navy because he thought he could get the opportunity to become a mechanical engineer, and the Navy made black men of his generation servants. But my father went to the polls and voted every election because he believed in the promise of America, the potential that is America, the hope that is America, and that you fight for that because it's bigger than you, and it's about our children and children yet to be born and generations to come. That's
Wow.
my hope for the world.
Dr. Martin, thank you so much. Thank our viewers. You're watching 60 Minutes in Black America. I'm Mike Haney. Don't forget to join us next week from Selma, Alabama, as we walk the Pettus Bridge. Good night. Have a wonderful week. Dr. Martin.